Hi, I'm Brianna Hetherington.
I'm Jen Hatcher. And I'm Kat Gottlieb.
Welcome to the Conscious Creator Community Podcast. We are over the moon excited to share our wisdom, experiences, and valuable insights to becoming the best version of yourself.
Before we dive in today, I want to say something directly to the men listening. Because if you've ever found yourself thinking something like, women seem different today than they did 10 or 20 years ago, or why does it feel like women are suddenly pushing back against things that used to feel normal? You're not imagining that shift. Something very real is happening culturally. And it's actually connected to everything we've been talking about so far in this series. For decades, centuries, and basically all of time, many women were taught, sometimes subtly and sometimes very directly, that attention from others felt good, and in some way it could be empowering. Either way, it was a way to get attention. If people noticed you, if people complimented your appearance, if people desired you, it meant you could be confident. But what many women and men, but let's talk about women for a second here, start realizing later in life, often in their 30s and 40s with life experience, is very different than the mainstream message that they learned so long ago. Attention and respect are not the same thing. Attention and self-worth are not the same thing. And attention and power are definitely not the same thing. So what you're seeing culturally right now isn't women becoming difficult or challenging or rebellious. It's women becoming more aware. And that can feel different, aware of the systems that shaped how they saw themselves, aware of the ways that attention sometimes replaced authentic confidence, aware that they now have freedom to define empowerment differently. And when that realization happens, people start rewriting the rules. That's the conversation we're having today. Hello, and welcome back to the Conscious Creator Community Podcast, your guiding light on the path to personal growth and transformation. Here, we create a safe place to connect, inspire, empower, and grow together into the depths of consciousness. And we invite you to join us in shaping a new reality. I'm Jen Hatcher, here with my incredible co-hosts, Kat Gottlieb and Brianna Hetherington. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Okay, I've been waiting for this episode to be really candid because today we get to talk about the intimacy paradox and the cultural shift that's happening as people begin questioning the systems that shaped them. And as somebody who is deliciously seasoned in life, I will say, I've experienced this myself. And one of the places this shift shows up the most is in modern relationships, because something profound has happened in our culture. We live in a world where sexual visibility has increased dramatically. We've talked about that for several episodes now, right? But emotional intimacy is harder to find. And it feels harder to find because it is. Psychologists increasingly describe this as the intimacy paradox of digital culture. And this digital culture we keep talking about encourages sexual performance and visibility. But authentic intimacy requires something so very different that we talk about a lot on this podcast: vulnerability, trust, and emotional safety. So, sexual performance and visibility, vulnerability, trust, and emotional safety, those two things don't operate the same way. And for this episode, I'm dropping questions right away. So, Bree, have you ever experienced a situation where there was a lot of attraction or attention, but very little real emotional intimacy?
Oh, yes, Jen, absolutely. I've experienced that, and I think many of us have. Whether they've named it or not, there can be a lot of attraction, a whole lot of chemistry, a lot of attention being exchanged. And on the surface, it feels really exciting. It can even feel powerful, like something meaningful is happening. But underneath that, there isn't always depth. And what I've come to understand over time is that attraction and attention are fast. They're immediate, they're visible, they're stimulating, but intimacy is different. Intimacy is slow, it's intentional, it's layered, it's earned, and it's built. It requires trust, vulnerability, emotional safety, and it requires two people willing to be seen beyond the surface. And when we're younger, it's very easy to confuse those things. You can mistake intensity for connection, you can mistake attention for care, and you can mistake being desired for being deeply known. But as you grow and as you start becoming more aware, you begin asking different questions. Do I feel safe here? Can I be fully myself? Is this person present with me or just attracted to me? Because real intimacy isn't about being admired. It's about being understood, seen, heard, valued, supported. It's about being accepted for who you actually authentically are. And that kind of connection is so much deeper than attention alone. Kat, what would you say?
So the question is like where the connection looks exciting on the surface, but underneath didn't feel safe. Yeah, look, for me, I think a good example is when I was dating in my mid-30s as a divorcee. Such a weird word, but I think it's also kind of like there's this weird stereotype around women in that phase of life that men feel overly comfortable asking for things without any kind of true connection. And for me, when they would make suggestions, it just felt very cheap, and I did not like how it made me feel internally. Like, who and what did they think I was, that I was available for their suggestions? It was it was really disappointing because when I got married the first time, very young and without much, like, experience sexually, I was just so naive about the way men act. So dating in my mid-30s, it felt like there was like dangerous landmines everywhere. Men would present themselves as single, but they were actually married. It was like so, guess the word I would use is insulting, that they were misrepresenting themselves to take advantage of me as a divorcee is like fair game, I guess. So maybe I'm off topic a little bit, but I think it connects because I think there's so many, like married people online asking for inappropriate things from maybe even young girls, as if being online makes it less wrong. But I think the resulting, the people who are being kind of presented and having these bad suggestions made to them online, it makes them feel like it's like cheap or insulted. It's kind of gross that someone is trying to take advantage of you. I think that resonates just as strong, maybe even stronger, when it's being done online by some weird stranger. I think this whole online phenomenon seems to give some people an inappropriate opportunity to ask for things or to look at things that are outside of what most people would consider okay when in a committed relationship.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Kat. I experienced so much in my 20s, especially of married men just being completely inappropriate. Absolutely. And, I think it's like layers where you see that, maybe there's a little bit of attraction here and maybe there's a little bit of chemistry here, but is it right to move forward with any action? Right. And I think we all have different circumstances. And a lot of times, it needs to be an aligned circumstance. And most of the time, it is not. So just having that awareness and then learning people's real intentions and their real truth about who they actually are.
Yeah, I think that's a hard lesson for young girls, like the power dynamic, right? Like, um, and when they're putting themselves out into the online world, I think that's even amplified even more, and it comes from so many directions. Good
Mhm.
attention, but then really bad stuff too. And, how do they process all of that?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I'm glad you brought it up. So, in many ways, our culture has been made sexually more visible than ever before. Social media, advertising, entertainment, influencer culture, sexual expression is constantly in front of us. But emotional intimacy, the kind where someone really sees who you are, requires something slower and deeper. It requires trust, authenticity, and vulnerability. And trust takes time and effort. Stepping into who you truly are takes a lot of inner work to unpack and unlearn all that you have learned and been taught to be.
Yeah. And this creates really confusing dynamic for a lot of people because people are being encouraged to present themselves in ways that attract attention. But like we've mentioned before, building meaningful relationships requires the opposite. It takes authenticity and honesty, and those might not be the things that are necessarily what people want to see online. And, like it takes emotional openness and availability. Psychologists described intimacy as a process of gradually revealing your authentic self to another person. That process can't happen in an environment focused primarily on like exterior performance. And there's actually data that reflects this disconnect. The Pew Research Center study found that nearly half of people using dating apps say their experiences leave them feeling more frustrated than hopeful. And more than 57% of women under 50 report receiving sexually explicit messages they didn't ask for. So think about the environment that creates. It encourages attention, it encourages inappropriate behaviors, but it doesn't necessarily encourage trust, emotional safety, or real connection. And that's exactly what the intimacy paradox describes. We've built systems that create more opportunities for attention than ever before, while many people feel like meaningful connection is actually harder to find.
And that's why I never went on the dating apps.
I think
I
we need a whole
Oh my God,
series
yes,
about
yes, yes,
online dating. We'll,
yes.
we'll dive into that.
Yes,
Whew.
yes, that will be so much fun and there will be so much learning that takes place to prep those episodes. So I really look forward to that. But before I talk about this shift as people are moving into their 30s and 40s, Kat, you just talked about intimacy. And as a 30 something divorcee, myself, single mom, right? To be so candid, some of my um, interactions were obviously less than desirable. We're talking about it, right? But they were so less than desirable. I was scared as heck of intimacy. Like when when I met my current husband, or not met, but started interacting with my current husband, love of my life, who brings me to life and is amazing and we love him. I was scared to open up to him, and he was very open and vulnerable with me, but it took me a while to let him in because I had been burned so hard. And I'm not going to say so many times because like I wasn't a big dater, but like the
Yeah,
burn stings a little, right? So I just want
absolutely.
to call that out. Like
Hmm.
you may be in a relationship or starting to date somebody where you are showing up fully and they might not be meeting you there, and it might be that they're not as interested as you are, but it's also very, very possible they are, and they are just scared and or hurt and or healing and or coming from a place where it hasn't been safe for them to be vulnerable and show up as their full self. And it takes a little bit to work past that. So I just wanted to call that out with with intimacy, because I, I am one of those people where it took a while for me to feel safe to open up, even though somebody had amazing intentions and was being very open with me. So
Yeah, I think that's a very legitimate experience when, especially when you're getting into the 30s and 40s. Like, yeah, once you've been burned a couple times, you do build up some barriers. It's very legit to say that.
more opportunities for attention than ever before, but that real emotional connection is hard to find. And that's where we're feeling this shift again, particularly as people get later into life. And I'm not saying late life, I'm saying later in life where you have some more life experiences. So 30s and 40s. And some social researchers have even coined this as awakening. Now, I want to be careful with that phrase awakening, because awakening is overused today, number one. Number two, it can mean a multitude of different things. And I'm I'm sharing it specific to this topic and social researchers. But the phrase awakening has been used. And so, you know, developmental researchers have, or I'm sorry, developmental psychologists have long observed that identity development doesn't stop in adolescence. We've talked a lot about those young years in this series, but that's not where it stops. You keep growing, hopefully, throughout your whole life. And in fact, many people go through a major identity reevaluation in their 30s and early 40s. Now, once upon a time, this was called like a midlife crisis
Yes.
because people would like uproot their whole life and they'd go do this and they'd change everything. And so we don't use that phrase today, and we don't see as many drastic changes, but it certainly happens. During this stage, again, 30s, 40s, maybe 50s, who knows? People start asking the deeper questions. And these may be questions like, who am I really? What do I actually value? What parts of my identity were shaped by outside expectations? And when we start to ask these questions of ourselves, sometimes we discover something surprising, that a lot of the behaviors, standards, expectations that were accepted earlier in life aren't actually aligned with who we are and what we want at all. And so I have more questions coming. So, Kat, our wise young owl, when you think about confidence today, how can you decipher true confidence versus a fake confidence you may have believed when you were younger?
Key indicator to me is the person's ability to be like vulnerable, honest, and to honestly like be able to laugh at themselves. To me, that's like a really good sign that they're authentically confident. True confidence. I look for someone who seems like centered, comfortable asking questions, and then listening to the answers, like without interrupting or inserting themselves or turning it back to themselves. It's like when they have an ability to share their opinion without suppressing anyone else's. They don't demean others or make fun or act better than. And fake confidence is people who are talking to be seen and heard, but without like real communication. the give and take of like a good conversation, they usually present themselves or display, I guess, what, like bravado or overly assertiveness as a counterbalance
Mm.
to the fact that they're probably really insecure. Fake confidence, to me, it can be felt more than anything. Like you just get that like weird ick feeling when you're around them. Bree, like what qualities now feel more like impressive or attractive than they used to for you?
Well, that's such a powerful question because the answer really does evolve. When I was younger, I was so drawn to what most people are drawn to at that stage, things that are external, right? That confidence that looks bold, charismatic, presence, success, appearance. I was definitely very intrigued by appearance and someone who could command attention in a room. Those things can feel magnetic when you're still discovering yourself, and they sure did to me. But as I grew, what feels impressive has completely shifted. Now I'm drawn to emotional maturity. Self-awareness is attractive. It is what I look for in all relationships, friendships, and such. Self-discipline, self-love, respect, kindness, integrity, humility. Someone who's grounded, someone who knows themselves, and someone who can communicate clearly, like you mentioned, Kat, and treats people with respect and kindness. And honestly, one of the most attractive qualities to me now is emotional safety. Being around someone where you can just exhale, where you feel fully seen, heard, valued, and safe. And I'm so grateful that I have found that in my wife, in my partner, Vanessa. She actually said to me this morning, she just turned to me and said, "One of my favorite things I've witnessed in your growth and evolution is your ability to be authentically you and see all your visions turn into your reality." Because at the end of the day, what sustains a relationship isn't attention. And I really confused this in my 20s. It's really about the presence, the character of that connection. It's the ability to be able to connect in truth, not in a performance, like we've talked about on the previous series episodes. To sit with the hard truths together, to be in just to be as together in resilience in the face of adversity. And I think that's the shift a lot of people experience as they grow. You stop asking what excites me, and you start asking who feels right for my nervous system, my peace, and my growth. And that realization can be incredibly powerful because for the first time, people begin separating that external validation from their internal worth. Earlier in life, attention may feel like this confident, charismatic thing that you experience, but later, many people realize that attention and respect are very different things. And when that realization happens, it often changes how people approach relationships. Like Jen asked or mentioned earlier, you start asking different questions. Many people begin asking, do I want attention or do I want connection? And I realized I really needed connection. I wanted it. I craved it. And I would even expand on this further. Do I want attention or do I want peace? Do I want validation or do I want truth? Do I want to keep being shaped by the loudest systems around me or do I want to consciously choose what forms my mind, body, beliefs, and my life? Because the deeper I've gone into my own healing and growth, the more I've realized that one of the most radical things we can do today is reclaim our attention, reclaim our time, and reclaim our inner world. And most importantly, radically value ourselves. If social media alone takes the typical adult user 2 hours and 23 minutes a day, that is over 16 hours a week and roughly 36 days a year. US adults spend about 2.6 hours a day watching television, which is another 39 plus days a year. These are not small numbers. This is life force. This is creative energy. This is the time we could be using to be present, healing, creating, connecting, moving our bodies, meditating, journaling, learning, serving, and actually hear ourselves think in stillness and being. So for me, this is not just a media conversation. It is a consciousness conversation because we are living in a time where our attention is constantly being pulled, shaped, and influenced. What are we allowing and what are we becoming more aware of? Because if we don't become intentional with where we're spending our energy and attention, someone else will monetize it for us. If we don't protect our mind, someone else will program it for us. If we don't define what is true, healthy, beautiful, and meaningful for ourselves, the culture will hand us a definition and it may not serve our soul or our consciousness.
This episode is part of our series, Identity in the Age of Algorithms and Hypersexualization. If you're enjoying these deeper conversations, follow the show and share this episode with someone who should be part of the discussion. Awareness is the first step to reclaiming identity.